Welcome to the One Big Thing podcast, where inspiration meets transformation. I'm Steve Campbell, your host, and I invite you to embark on this exhilarating journey with me. Are you searching for that extra spark, that push to propel you in the right direction? Look no further. The One Big Thing is all about bringing you incredible guests from diverse backgrounds. So picture this: professional athletes, visionary business leaders, fellow podcasters, and even awe-inspiring stay-at-home moms who are all conquering life's challenges. Get ready to seize your moment of greatness. Don't miss out. Subscribe and follow the One Big Thing podcast today. Well, welcome back to the One Big Thing podcast. I am your host, Steve Campbell. If you are brand new to this show because you're a fan of my guest today, I want to welcome you in. The One Big Thing is an interview style podcast where I just have the ability to talk to people that I've known over the years, people that I've just met, influencers of all stages of life, to really hear their behind the scenes stories, culminating in the one big thing or the several life lessons that they've learned that we can bring to you as a listener that can be some real practical takeaways. And the feedback from all of you on this show so far leading up to this episode has been phenomenal. I love hearing from you. Please do not stop reaching out to me on Instagram or on Facebook or sending me an email, letting me know how much these episodes mean to you. And I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation as I have the honor and privilege of interviewing a good friend of mine, Spencer Smith. Spencer and I met years ago, actually through my wife, who was on episode 1, where Steph and I talked about marriage and parenting and how hard it is. So if you missed my rock star wife, go listen to episode 1. But she was the one that knew Spencer. And then just over the years, he and I got to know each other through different business circles and doing life together. And when I was putting together kind of the lineup of my first few guests of the show, he was somebody that I reached out to and said, "Hey, Spence, would you want to come on the show? Talk about your life, talk about what you've been through." So I want to welcome to the One Big Thing Studio podcast, Spencer Smith. Spencer, do you want to take a few minutes here at the beginning to kind of let our listening audience know a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be one of the first 10 guests to be on. So that's awesome. So, I haven't missed an episode yet, and you've been doing an awesome job. So it's really awesome to see somebody letting it rip and doing awesome, man. This has been a fun podcast to listen to and super educational too. I've learned a lot, and I love hearing other people's perspectives. So, yeah, my name is Spencer Smith. I'm first and foremost, I'm a husband and a father and a family man. Number one. Second, though, I'm an entrepreneur. I started my first business in 2014. At the very beginning of it, maybe towards the tail end of 2013. My brother was right beside me. We're the first 2 employees. That started we started planning December of 2013, officially became a business in March of 2014. And over that course of the past almost 10 years now, we have sold our first company and started ultimately another 4 companies. Again, started with just he and I were the first 2, and it grew. The first company grew to almost 100 people at any given time. Got incredibly busy and crazy and very complex, because when you first start it, you have very high aspirations of what you want the company to be. But then all of a sudden, you are an entrepreneur with an idea, starting a business, doing sales, wearing a whole bunch of hats. Next thing you know, you're a CEO of a company, having to make decisions, having 100 different families essentially connected to all of your business decisions. And that was a major eye-opening experience that I've had, from taking an idea to now all of a sudden it's real, and every decision you're making is affecting a lot of people. So so that's essentially my background. Now like I said, we sold one, so we have 4 companies now, all of various sizes. But my main company is a sports flooring company. We install basketball courts, sand basketball courts, design them, and do maintenance codes all through New York State, Pennsylvania, and we're starting to dip our toe into like New Jersey, Vermont. We have our eyes on a few things there too. So it's a little bit smaller now. But go ahead, sir.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely make sure that we include in the show notes some of your social media handles, because I think it's super cool when you talk about gym flooring and the work that you guys do. You guys do some phenomenal work. And so we're going to have Spencer's details in the show notes. And if you're somebody that just wants to see kind of exceptionalism at a high level, then you can follow his Instagram for his business, because I think it's just very cool to see the work that you're doing. But there's so much that you and I are going to unpack, because again, if you're new to the one big thing, sometimes you may not necessarily understand or completely feel like you're in touch with what our guest is speaking about, depending upon what the nature of their job is. If you're somebody who's not into entrepreneurship and you just work for a corporation, having somebody talk about owning not only one, but now 4 businesses, and in the kind of level of responsibility that comes with that, don't tune out. Okay. Don't tune out if you've never been kind of in this world, because like you learned from Allison in my last episode, when she talked about leadership, it doesn't matter if you're leading a business from the front, or in Spencer's case, you're still a husband, you're still a wife, you're a parent, you have kids, you are leading in some capacity. I think breaking down a little bit of your story today is going to help, regardless of where you are at life. Maybe it's something that you're aspiring to, or there's just going to be some practical takeaways about the life lessons you've learned. But I think what's super great about your connection with me is we kind of started in business around the same time, 2012, 2013. So to kind of see your journey from afar, from where it started for the two of us, just 2 young guys trying to break into the business world, to now hear how your business story has cycled into not only selling one company, but launching 4. I think when you bring guests like Brett, who was in episode 3 on the show, Brett is farther along in this journey than I was. So he's somebody that's, 20 years ahead, providing wisdom backwards about what he's learned. And that's, super practical, and that's great. But I think it's also great when you have somebody who's right in the thick of it like you are. And as I say on this show, a lot of our listeners in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. So it's not like we have somebody in their 50s and 60s kind of talking about life lessons of owning all of these companies. You are literally right in the thick of it, going to share kind of what you've learned, whether good, bad, or indifferent. So I know you gave us a high level overview, but why don't you kind of just, 4 companies, catch us up? How did we kind of get to where we are today?
Sure. So, originally, I went to school for something completely different than what I was originally planning to, or what I'm currently doing. I went to school. I was completely in the creative field. I was in communications with a focus on film and acting and sound production, things like that. Me and my now wife started dating our freshman year. I got into a good film school program. It was a little bit more like artsy avant-garde. Not, if I had the degree, it's not really going to open any industry doors. And I was starting to see, if I was going to be in that industry, I would have to make a major move, whether that's in New York City or moving to LA. And my wife, who's truly my best friend, we're best friend in high school. Truly, we both had separate boyfriend and girlfriends, and truly grew a friendship first, and then it turned into a relationship, our freshman year in college. And I didn't want to leave my best friend. The idea of living on futons and sharing a 2-bedroom apartment with 8 guys trying to make it, slowly started to be like, I don't know if that's exactly what I want to do. I mean, for doing something creative, that's the ultimate goal behind it, as I wanted to be creative. And I wanted to be ultimately in control of my own life. So I'm like, I followed her to a different school that had a communications program that was much more broad, focused more on marketing and advertising, to have a little bit more of a broad idea of what I could do professionally. Also, similar to you, my grandfather, I almost went into the financial industry because my grandfather had a financial services company. So as soon as I graduated, I did some interning there. I was starting to study for my Series 7 exam. I did life accident and health tests and things like that. Now, as I'm doing that, I was also doing their marketing, which I really enjoyed, and was starting to work through some rebranding things. But during that process, and I was around that industry, I realized I'm like, this ultimately is not for me. It just didn't feel right. It's a great industry. It's people do some really incredible things for so many people, but it just didn't align with who I was. So I decided to look elsewhere for a job, and I was actually going to start my own marketing firm. But I got a job as a graphic designer. I left, got essentially a part-time job at a foundation doing graphic design and some marketing things. And while I was there, I was still living at home at the time. And my dad came home from work. My dad ran operations for a a pretty large facility services company. And, he was the director of operations, and he came home, and I learned a little bit about that business because I would, over the summers in high school and college, be put to work to do some of that stuff. And, was certainly the low man on the totem pole doing, all the dirty work. And, one of that things certainly gave me a really great work ethic. And then also, my dad's approach was like, get him to work hard and, follow something that he ultimately wants to do. So I was living at home. My dad comes home from work, and because I've been in that business for a while, I knew a lot of the people, and he mentioned one of their regional managers decided to leave and go and move out of the area. So it was a pretty big hole to fill, but I also knew it was a pretty good job. So at this point in time, I had a part-time graphic design job. I was starting to try to figure my way out of starting a company and starting a marketing company, and which was a really slow process. I was 22 years old. I had no idea really what I was doing. And he mentioned that, this guy quit. I'm like, well, is the job open? And he's like, yeah, but you don't want any part of this. It's a tough job. It's a tough industry to be in. He's like, you just keep following what you were following. And, against what his advice was, I actually called the HR department the next day and said, hey, I would love to interview with it, because I was connected there. They're like, yeah, come in for an interview. And I went through an interview process. And then about 2 weeks later, I was offered a job. It was a good salary job, at the time for a 22-year-old. Me and my girlfriend at the time, my now wife, we wanted to move in together. We found a house that we were going to rent, and I knew that was going to help make ends meet and make things more comfortable. And I was like a typical 22-year-old who knows everything. I thought I was still going to be able to do both. This job should be easy. How hard could this industry be? Which was, facility services, a lot of janitorial accounts, some maintenance accounts, but more than anything, it was in the janitorial industry. And I started doing that. And sure enough, about 2 weeks in, I realized that this is going to be completely all encompassing. It turned into a 60-hour a week job. It was incredibly stressful and busy, and I was certainly over my head. I had no real life experience up until this point. I had a pretty good childhood upbringing, and things came relatively easy to me, whether it be sports and school. I never was challenged too much, and then this is the first thing that really, really challenged me. And also just kind of looking at the world with rose-colored glasses, it really opened my eyes to really how the real world works. And I certainly wasn't prepared for that. The stress of it all certainly got the best out of me, but I kept chugging through. And then my dad actually left that company at the time. So, it was nice to have him around because I could bounce ideas off him, because he was there for, I think about 13 or 14 years. So he knew it in and out. He left to go to more on the supply side of the industry. And then while I was there, I started hearing rumors that the company might be being sold. And I kept hearing it more and more. And then I started to really see some of the writing on the wall, some things that indicate a business might be getting sold. So at that time, it was a week before I got married. I got a job on the supply side of this industry as well, but I was going to have to move to Albany. So I was going to have to move 2.5 hours away. And like I said at the beginning of the podcast, number one, I'm a family person. My family means the world to me. They're what keeps me going in everything that I do. I mean, currently my whole family works for me. My wife is on payroll. My sister-in-law is on payroll. My mom, my dad, and my brother. So my core family is everything to me. Yeah. Which is crazy. It's a crazy thing at this point. But at the time, I was like, I'm going to have to move 2.5 hours away. I'm like, I've got to come home every weekend. Is this what I want to do? And then I got married. I had the opportunity to take this job, which was actually a step in the right direction for growing my career financially, and the opportunity in this company. It's a national company, so there's a lot of room for growth. But my wife, so we got married, and my wife was saying, like, you've always really wanted to start your own thing. When are we going to do that? Like, when do you want to do that? And one of my biggest fears was to essentially fail for her and for us. I'll fail for myself. That's okay. I always kind of, I don't mind to put myself through some things, but I'm like, I'm just married, and now I'm going to start a business. I don't know if I really want to do that and, end up in my parents' couch in 2 months right after we got married. But, we sat there 2 days after we got married, and we were talking. We did a pros and cons list, and it was pretty equal, but it ultimately came down to, like, when are you going to pull the trigger and try it? And, like, we didn't have kids. We're 22 years old. I have a good friend who I was kind of bouncing ideas off of, and it's kind of explaining some of my concerns and fears. And my this particular friend didn't really come from anything, so he really knows what it's like to grow up, at the bottom of the barrel. And he kind of said to me, "Hey, what is the worst case scenario? It's like you have a family who loves you, who's going to put you up for a few months until you get back on your feet. You really don't have that much to lose. You have a wife that's supporting you. When else are you going to do that?" And that was that final push. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. And then once I did that, we went whole hog into it, and it's been just crazy growth since. But yeah, so that's kind of lost track of your original question. I just started rambling, so my apologies.
Man, there is so much, Spencer, that you just shared that as I was taking notes listening to you, and I kind of want to jump back into, because in your story, if you just tuned into the beginning of this episode and you have, somebody who's the same age as me, mid-30s, owns not only multiple businesses, just sold a business, it would be very easy to separate yourself or feel like, man, I have nothing in common with Spencer. I'm still kind of discovering myself. But then as you share your story, what I just heard, which can give kind of grace to somebody in their situation, is how much you had to reinvent yourself over the years, because you went to school originally for acting and film, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you pursued
Yep.
that path until you no longer realized that was what you wanted to do. You did a little bit of marketing, nothing to do with acting and film. You went into graphic design, maybe more in line with marketing, but still very different on the surface. And then you went into kind of this, maintenance position. And so early on in your life, you really had 4 very different focuses, but you didn't allow any one of those focuses to derail the future plans. You really just kept trying things until you found what made sense to you. And I think even sharing a little bit about your background in the financial services and giving that a shot, your spider sense, your intuition went off and said, maybe this isn't for me. And it just makes me wonder how many people feel stuck in situations because you were able in your early 20s, with your wife Tess, to really take a chance. But as you add more complexities, or as your layers of dependency continue to grow, when you're a single person, it's just you. You take chances, you fail, it's on you. You get married to a spouse, and now the stakes are a little bit higher, because if you fail, it's really 2 of you. When you start adding kids into the mix, man, that adds a whole nother layer of complexity. And I just wonder how many people over the years have maybe had that same spider sense intuition that you had, but never took the leap of faith, never did anything different. And now there's more responsibility on their plate where doing anything different seems even harder, because maybe they're in a position or they're in a job where they just hate going to work every day, or they're not passionate about what they're doing, but they know they have 1, 2, 3, 4 kids in school, and maybe their spouse stays home, or even their spouse works, but they're the main income earner, and people feel stuck.
Yeah.
They can't take chances because they're not in their 20s. So I just want to help somebody understand and really glean from your story. We got at the beginning kind of where you are today, the super high level, which is fascinating. But that's what I love about this podcast, is going backwards a little bit and saying, like, it probably wasn't always this way. Let's kind of start from the beginning. So there was a number of things, that I heard that, if you want to touch on any of that, and, kind of, I don't know if you want to walk us through what you're doing now with some of these businesses. I love the fact that you got the majority of your family members working for you, but even just kind of lessons, what you've learned along the way, anything that you think can help maybe that listener right now who feels maybe stuck or needing some inspiration. What are some things that you would share about your own particular journey?
Sure. Yeah. So, while it was a huge, leap of faith to start the company, and there was a million different times during that process where you have that feeling of stuck, because once you do take that leap and you no longer have a paycheck coming in from a company, you're kind of like, you feel stuck there immediately. You start the business, you make an investment, and you're like, okay, I'm in this now. There was times where, when we first started, we didn't have a single account. There was an older gentleman that I knew who was trying to get out of the business, and I bought his single account from him. And me and my brother would go out there, and mind you, I went, we had a college degree. I had a pretty a good paying job. I turned down another job, and this first account was a janitorial services account. So me and my brother would go out at night 3 days a week, and we would clean this office space. during the, in the evening, I would do that. During the day, I would leave the house with 100 business cards. I really wouldn't come home until I had 0 business cards left. I would stop in place, even when I know it was going to be a swing and a miss, because you start, the area of upstate New York, in the Binghamton area, there's only so many places to go. And you start, inching your way out to Oneonta or Scranton in northern Pennsylvania. So I hit every single place I can, and then most of them can become complete whiff, and you don't get a call back. But you start making contacts. You start thinking, your back gets put against the wall, and you start thinking pretty creatively. And with that, we stumbled into a student housing industry. So we ended up being the premier student housing turn cleaning company for Binghamton, Oneonta, Syracuse, Albany. So I went from me and my brother one for 4 or 5 months to now we have 60 people working for us for a 3 or 4 week period. We're spread out all over the state, and you have to get all of this work done. And the reason why we did that is the sales cycle of getting like an account, like a cleaning account or a maintenance account, can be a 3-year cycle. So if you're just trying to focus on that, it may take a long time to get an account. So we did that. We were doing the student housing thing, but in the background too, the wood floor stuff started because I knew how to do maintenance coats on wood floors, and I also knew some subcontractors who knew how to sub or sand down a floor, do game lines and logos. So through some of the contacts I had with some schools, I was able to subcontract some work that way, and that was allowed us to have enough money to get through some tough times where there was no work going on, and that lasted for a few years. But through that process, I certainly got in my own way a lot of the time, because a lot of the problems that I was creating for myself weren't really problems. They're problems that you're creating in your mind. And over the course of this past 8 to 10 years, it was a slow learning of understanding how you are viewing the challenges that are set in front of you is how you experience them. So at first, I was thinking, we're all thinking for the most part, a lot of us from our ego. We're looking at it from, what I want to get, what is happening to you. It feels like it's happening to yourself. But I slowly tried to move that into the passenger seat, kind of put more of like your spirit in the driver's seat and what feels right to you. And like you said, the spidey senses, that's, those intuition things. Once I started following my intuition and realizing things that are just are happening to you, you are kind of in charge of the way you are perceiving them. That's when things completely start changing for me. And once I started to get out of my own way with some of the problems and harping on some of the, and being negative about some of the things that were happening to me, and I put those aside, and just as good things come at me, bad things come at me, just let them flow and keep staying in the moment and listening to your intuition. And and not only intuition as from like a business decision sense, just what feels right to you. There has been really good opportunities that have been set in front of me that financially look really, really good, but I'll say it just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel right for some reason. I've pushed those aside and took on things that became less profitable in that moment that ended up turning into much more profitable things for us 3 years down the line. So once I kind of got out of my own way, that's when things really, really started to happen for me.
Well, even within that, right, to get very practical. So what you're talking about is breaking cycles or breaking thought patterns that, as I said, when you listen to a show like this or you go to a conference or whatever, it's easy to get psyched up about what somebody spoke about and say like, okay, great, I'm going to stop thinking negatively and start perceiving differently. But there's usually things that you need to build into your day or ways that you need to begin to like rethink about what you're thinking about. And so I'm wondering, even with you, was there anything that you started to figure out or implementing into your day or setting time aside that helped you begin to retrain? Because you can't just go from having negative thoughts to being the most positive person out there. Was there anything personally for you that, either you and your wife did together that just kind of reframed how you were looking at things?
100% is meditation. Meditation has completely changed my life and my wife's life completely. She was the one who really discovered it, and and she did a specific type of meditation called Kundalini meditation, which is really intense breath work at times. You're doing weird chanting and moving your hands, and she started kind of going down her own journey with it. And I was watching her, and it looked insane. I'd be walking through the house, and she'd be on a meditation pillow, moving her hands in crazy ways, and doing these deep breaths and moving, and it looked crazy. And I'm like, but it was working for her. I was starting to see like a shift in some of her mentality, and she was telling me like, you got to try it. And then after she was about 5 or 6 months into it, I finally tried it, and I felt completely silly doing it. I'm sitting there, I'm saying all these weird mantras and some sort of other language I didn't understand at the time, and what I was saying. And you start to see really how self-conscious you are all the time, and how in your own head I'm by myself, and you should be completely comfortable by yourself to do whatever you want, but you feel like, why am I moving my hands in a weird way and doing this strange breath? But once I just kept doing it and kept focusing on it, and that totally was able to help me slow my mind down a little bit and help me be a little bit more aware in day-to-day moments. And that's just started me on a real spiritual path, because when I first started the business, I was agnostic, slightly atheist, but agnostic, and now I have come completely on the other side and know how truly magical the universe is. And that was I would say my biggest lesson through all this business. It brought me, I started this with like driven by finances and money and goals, and a little bit more on the material end of things. And I've ended up with the amount of success that we've had over 10 years, not really care about any of that at all. It's been meditation and, focus on spirituality and all different avenues. I learned from Christianity to Buddhism to other, great thinkers like Ram Dass or Wayne Dyer, Eckhart Tolle. That's kind of all I focus on now. And since I've really separated from focusing on anything growth wise from a financial standpoint, that's just kind of keeps coming in a different way once I didn't make that my main focus anymore.
Well, and I find that fascinating because Bradley Rose of Peloton had talked about same thing for him, how meditation changed his life. And whether it's meditation or, my heart, faith is the biggest part of my life. We all need some kind of grounding mechanism, whatever you want to call it. Something that, the way a grounding wire works is that when electricity basically needs to stop to not set a house on fire, you would have grounding wires to basically stop the flow of it, to make sure that it doesn't escalate beyond the place that it is. And so for you, that might be meditating, but I would challenge you as a listener, what is your grounding mechanism for you? Let's just at the surface. Yes, you have these companies. Yes, you have all these employees, super important, but that can all be gone tomorrow. At the core, you have your wife, right? And you have your family, right? And so if the outside world of the business is thriving, but your own home life is in shatters, right? Then there's a displacement. Yep. And I think what you touched on, and it's a lot of what Allison touched on too, when you're young and you're starting off in life, you have these goals, you have these aspirations of getting to the top, whatever that means, the top of your industry, the top of your business. When you are successful, usually that means that money, influence comes with that. And Allison kind of touched on it too in her episode, where she talked about when you finally she was leading a company from the front, but she wasn't able to pick her kids up. She wasn't able to step away from work because there was so much responsibility from her that her husband, and this is what I love about our show, is how many people that have been married talking on the show about how their spouses have been so influential behind closed doors. So to all the spouses out there, don't forget how important you are. But her husband looked at her and basically was like challenging her that she obviously wasn't happy. And you are led to believe that when you have these things, when you're in a season of not having something, you can almost rely on the sense of, well, when we have more money, then I'll be happy. When we have more money coming in, or when we have a break from our kids, we'll be happy. And then you get to these points where what you expected to happen versus the actual experience is very different. And it's that gap in between that's super confusing. So in your story, you realize that it's not all about money. It's glad that it didn't take you to your deathbed and the end of your life to
Yeah.
realize, money is not going to make you happy, but you've used meditation as a way to help you separate that our minds as dads, as moms, as business owners are constantly going so fast, and we can be so overwhelmed by the roles, responsibilities that I find when I drive in my car, I don't really know what to think about because everything is competing for my thoughts at the same time, that it can make you begin to think you're not good at anything, when in reality, it's just this rush of thoughts that are coming into your head. So I love that meditation for you personally has helped you build something into your day to start to de-stress, to have that grounding wire mechanism that's maybe hopefully coming out of this allowed you to see all the good that actually is in your life that is sometimes covered or masked up by the roles, responsibilities, and the negativity that we can so easily allow to cloud our judgment.
Yeah, yeah, and you said something interesting too, right? It's these thoughts. You're driving, and it's finally you by yourself. You've been, whether you're with your kids, your wife, or being pulled in a million different directions with business or customers calling you, employees calling you, and you're alone. Then you start getting flooded with all these thoughts, and some positive, some negative, some all over the place. And having the realization and learning that you don't have to believe every thought that comes to your head. They're just thoughts. It's
Yep.
easy to attach yourself to these things that are flying at you while you're driving, and you're thinking of all the good things, the problems, the things that you're aspiring to while you're driving. And then I try to be as aware as I possibly can and take a breath. And I've learned this through meditation, is just like watch your thoughts. Sometimes it's good to just be the observer, to say, oh, that's just a thought. If it's a negative thought, you then examine that thought. Say, where's that thought coming? Is it a fear-based thought? And once you start doing that, you start to absolutely detach yourself from these thoughts that come into your head, and you realize that's your ego, which is an important mechanism for survival. And there's a lot of different practices, or different spirituality platforms that talk about, like, melting your ego, or eliminate your ego. That's not possible. It's learning to work with your ego and let that be a tool for certain things in your life, but don't let that be in the driver's seat all the time. That was the true biggest lesson that I learned, is because the ego's convincing. It's a hard-headed, convincing voice, and just to let them to take a seat in the passenger seat and focus on centering yourself and who on your spirit, or whatever word you want to use. That observer of all of your thoughts, let them be the driver of everything in your life. And if you can have them in the driver's seat most of the time, a lot of your problems start to fade away. And then sometimes, to me, it's even funny when I have some of these weird negative thoughts that come up, and I can say, I'm like, that's just a thought. That's not what I really believe. That's not really who I am. That's not really what I think about this particular person or this particular issue that I'm facing. It's just a thought. And just let the thought come, and then let it go, and stay centered. And that was the biggest thing that I've learned over the course of the 8 years. And it took me 7 years of really just shitty thinking, a bad approach to a lot of what you could call problems, because there's really not problems, just things happening. It's how you're going to perceive them. So once I really shifted the way how I perceive things, that was the biggest game changer for me. And
we're also complex as human beings, because
Yeah.
a few minutes ago we talked about how in your world it's learning how to trust your gut or your
Yeah.
intuition. So on one hand, we're telling you that as humans, we're fascinating, that there's this inner voice, there's this inner something that many times, like you know when you're a parent and you walk into a room that you shouldn't be there, or like it's time to take your kids and go.
Yeah.
You know when you're in a business meeting and you can't see through the person talking to you, your spider sense goes off, and like it's not. So like if you're listening, we're not trying to be like super spiritual or like weird, just saying we all have this innate sense sometimes when something is wrong. But on
Yeah.
the other end, now we're trying to tell you that as much as that first part is good and can be a leading guide, we're also trying to tell you that your emotions and your thoughts can sometimes be very misleading, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the delicate balance between the two of them, which is, my wife and I talk about all the time that emotions are great, but emotions and feelings can never take the place of of the reality of what we're going through or the situation, because the human brain can create thousands of scenarios about situations that seem so real but will probably never happen, whether it's like Peter and I talked about in our episode, dealing with things like boundaries and toxic relationships and difficult conversations. When you get into heated debates or situations with colleagues, with brothers and sisters, with parents, if between the time that a situation happens and when you finally have a conversation about what happened, that time in between, your mind can create thousands of scenarios of the person, of the situation, and it gets worse and worse and worse, to the point that then you begin to think so negatively about something because your brain, your mind, what have you, is trying to tell you of, we're going to get into an all-out fist fight. And then what you realize is you go have a cup of coffee and things are fine. But
Yeah.
what happens is you begin to believe like, oh my God, they're going to beat me up if I talk about all this stuff. And your brain is so incredible that it can make you truly feel like these things are actually going to happen. So I think it's hard, and maybe why meditation has helped you and spending time in prayer, has helped me, is learning how to filter. Just like Instagram, we all have these filters we can lay over photos, which change the makeup of the image that we're looking at. We all have a spiritual filter. No matter what you believe in life, there is a real spiritual dynamic. And I experienced this when I went to Africa several years ago. Not everybody believed what I believed about the world, but there was this spiritual dynamic that existed with every person, which is how as human beings were created. The journey as to how we discover that is very different for all of us. But the filters through which we look at scenarios, prayer, meditation, what have you, can help you sort through, like, where did that thought come from?
Mhm.
Like, even if it's a negative thought about your spouse because you got into a high stress situation about money or about raising your kids or just attitudes, if you're not careful, you can believe that your spouse is no good for you. You can believe your spouse doesn't love you. And it's like these feelings that if you don't actually address, can lead to divorce, can lead to separation, because the reality is your wife loves the crap out of you.
Mhm.
Your brain, your mind, whatever this thing is telling you that they don't support you. And I think it's learning how in that moment, which is, and I think you were going to kind of go into this, our thoughts and our reality. The
Mhm.
reality of the situation is my wife loves me like crazy and she's my biggest fan. But when a thought enters my mind that she doesn't support me, I have to learn to identify, where did that thought come from? And
Mhm.
is it really based in reality? Or is my emotions getting the best of me because I'm upset or because I'm overwhelmed? And I'm not tackling that thought right now, which, if I don't do that, will begin to create this narrative that if I don't begin to address, you might be looking at your kids the wrong way. You might be looking at your spouse the wrong way. You might be thinking as somebody leading a company that none of your employees support you or the vision. And if you're not careful, you might be creating these constructs in your mind that aren't rooted in anything real. It's just disappointment, frustration. So in your world and in the roles that you have, is what I just said accurate to what you've gone through? And like, how have you worked through some of that?
Yeah, yeah, no, and I think you're spot on when you say that, and when you say those thoughts, those those negative thoughts, referring to your like your thoughts about your wife not supporting you in a particular way. When you do know deep down, when you quiet your mind, you know that when things are fine, because those are just things that ebbs and flows of marriage and just having a relationship with anybody, whether it be a brother, a dad, a mom, a friend of many years. There's highs and lows. We're all going through things too. So all of our interactions are, it's not just me interacting with them, it's them and their perception of the world communicating with me and my perception of the world at a particular time of day, with whatever they had on in their life, with whatever I have going on in my life. And then they clash. And sometimes it's great. And you guys are harmonious. And it's that's when you're reminded, like, I love this person so much. And then they may be going through their own personal thing, and then you might be going through something positive, and you're separate a little bit because they're on their own personal journey. And you start to realize, okay, those are my, like, when you want to find your center. I say all this because to stay centered and know whatever you have going on in your life, you control the way that you're seeing it. it's just thoughts, and then you start controlling your thoughts and realizing you kind of lasso those negative thoughts that are just coming at you, because it can be addictive too, right? Like even though it's a negative thought and it's not a positive thing, it floods the ego, and it feeds the ego, because it's I'm right, they're wrong. It's even though it's a negative a topic that you might be thinking about, it does feel good in a weird way, even though it's a negative feeling. You're feeding into the ego. And then once you start realizing that you're doing that, because I have a particular employee who I've been friends with for a while, who ended up causing a lot of problems. And there started to become this problem between the two of us, essentially. And it wasn't until I started doing the meditating, realizing it's like, he's not doing that to me. He has his own things going on in his life, which are in turn affecting my life and some of my business things, but I can change the way I'm perceiving it. Because then once I started changing the way I perceived it, my decision making around that from a business standpoint started to change. I would see the actions that he was doing, and I'd make a completely different decision business wise that would completely it would be completely different than what it was before. I don't know if that makes sense or not to you.
Yeah, I mean, well, and what did that give you the ability to do through meditation in your life? It allowed you to look at the scenario in a completely different way, which hopefully changed where the narrative was heading.
Yeah.
And I think if you and I aren't careful, especially as being two men in business, if our relationship with our spouse isn't at the place that we want, either because it's misexpectations or we haven't been honest with each other, even though deep down we know we love each other, let's say that we've allowed some negative thoughts to enter our own personal minds when we're in our car by ourselves or what have you, which has started to begin to skewer the way that we see our spouse. When you lead a business, when you lead in a community, it's very easy to fall into the trap of your employees that love and heap praise upon you, or clients that heap praise upon you, to begin to want to be fed by the places that make you feel good. And so I don't know if this has ever been your experience, but if things aren't at the place that you want it to be in your home life, maybe your marriage isn't where you want it to be. As a parent, you're stressed out every single night when you come home, and getting your kids to bed is like World War III every single night.
Yeah.
When you go to work during the day, if every time Spencer does something, your employees appreciate you so much, they let you know verbally, they let you know via email, and you feel like on top of the world, we got to be careful that we don't only spend time in the places that feed that ego and not address maybe the things that, if we're being all honest with ourselves, it's like, man, yeah, it's easy but these people aren't with you every day. They don't make decisions with you about your money, about your life, about raising kids. They literally work for you, or they're community members that want you to support the big vision of the community, owning these businesses. And it can feel like, man, everyone loves me wherever I go. But when I'm home, it feels like every time my wife looks at me like I'm an idiot. And if you're not careful, that's not true. That's just like you said, it's the way that we're perceiving, because of the counterpoint of every time we say something at work, people that work for us because they want to keep their job, or Spencer, that's so good. And you sometimes can fall into this subconscious, like you want your spouse or you want the people that like really know you to appreciate you verbally or do things the way that people that work for you do. And if you're not careful, it can sour the way that at the end of the day, all of your employees could be gone.
Totally.
But you still have your spouse, right? You still have your child. So like for you, has there been anything along those lines that maybe have helped you grow as a leader or start to take control of your thought life or just things that you deal with personally?
Yeah, as far as home life goes, I personally haven't really had too much of that. My wife and I, like I said, being such good friends, we we know each other so well. To your point though, because so we know how to communicate with each other for the most part. I mean, anytime you're with somebody 24/7, 10% of the time there's going to be miscommunications, and kind of like what I was saying before, they're going through they're experiencing their own life, and they had a whole day without me, and they might be coming to a particular situation in a completely different mindset. I could have had the best day in the world. They could have had a tough day, and now we're communicating. So that might be a day where we're not on par with one another. But for the most part, we do communicate with each other very well. So I haven't ran into that so much from a home life standpoint. But to your point, you will come home and you'll be a hero at work on a particular day, and then you come home and that you're not wearing that hat anymore. Now you're husband, your dad, and you left a mess down in the garage and it's trash night, and you missed it last week, and it's the garage smells like dog shit because you haven't taken that out, right? Like, so yeah, I understand you wear different hats, and sometimes when the work world though, that's not the way I look at it. Is, I try to put myself, the core of who I am into who I am at work every day, because when I do that, that's when I find the most success. But you're playing a role, so that's just a corner of who I am as a complex person and as a spiritual person. So when you come home, you're getting the most, there's no role there. It's you are who you are at your core. So that's it feels good sometimes to be at work and things are going really well for you and you feel on top of the world, and then you come home and it really doesn't matter anymore. That's just it's just essentially a character in society that you're playing at that time. So yeah, there is an adjustment sometimes when you had one of the greatest days, and then it doesn't really matter when you get home because other things need to get done, or there's personal things that are happening, whether it be in your married life and things happening in your household, or beyond that, with extended family or friends and issues coming home, that stuff disappears. And to switch hats sometimes can be challenging, but kind of going back to the meditating and staying centered, helps you stay more even keel, because I would have a lot of highs and lows. And you get addicted to that, right? You chase the high of, we got this new account, we're going to make X amount of money, things are great. And then next day there's a problem, and so-and-so quit, or we're losing this account. Now you're crashing, and then it's just a roller coaster ride all the time. I experience a lot of less highs and lows. It's more even keel. So I'm not getting those jolts as much anymore of the high of winning a big account, but I'm not getting the lows as well anymore. Like, we're losing something, or this sale didn't go through, so we're having cash flow issues, because that's a lot of the things that you experience throughout running a business. You're on the brink of bankruptcy for a few years. Just hopefully somebody's paying you, and you're having all these highs and lows. And a lot of those highs and lows that I experienced were because I would let myself get caught into those moments of what's happening. So zooming out and staying centered helps me completely, eliminate the highs and lows and just more even keel. So,
yeah. And that part, just so you know, my wife listens to every one of these episodes. Stephanie, if you're listening, I'm not necessarily talking about the example I just went through as us, but in doing this role, being with friends, with people my age over the years, having coffee, and having couples over, I know that this is a very real thing for some people, which is they are struggling to make their marriage work. They're struggling to be the best parent they want to be. And many times it kind of sounds like, from what you shared and what I've experienced, even on the drive home from work to the place where you're not playing a role, you are who you are. You're a husband, you're a wife, you're a parent, kind of detoxing in that time on the way home. Because if you're not careful too, we can also saddle our spouse with things that they never asked for. So when you do have that high at work, it's great to come home and tell your spouse, we crushed it today, we got the new account. But if you also the next day lose an account, lose an employee, and you come home, your spouse has their own things that they've been dealing with that day. And it's so easy to want to share all the negative things that happened at work. And now we're putting emotions on our spouse that, if we're not careful too, and Steph and I kind of talked about this, our spouse one day might look at us and be like, I don't care. Because it's just a lot for us to deal with. And so one thing that I was going to ask you too, and again, we didn't talk about this at the beginning of the show, but with you growing from you and your brother to now multiple companies and all of these, employees, are there any lessons in just dealing with people, maybe from being a business owner, that you could shed light on that maybe you didn't get right at the beginning, but now you're just learning, leading all these people?
Yeah. And I think it was kind of touching on the last thing I said, which was a realization is that everyone's living their own life. When you're running a business and you're putting everything on the line, all of your finances on the line, you're at risk all the time. You're completely exposed, whether it's financially or on a personal standpoint, doing things for people to help you grow your business. And then when someone doesn't do something or fall short, it's, you kind of are like, why aren't you doing that? Like, why don't you share the same vision as me? And a lot of times the managing person, you have to understand, they are living their own life. I don't know what's happening behind closed doors 90% of the time in their world. And, looking at each individual truly as an individual with their own story, their own problems, their own triumphs happening at any given time. So, I don't know if you know much about boxing or anything like that, but Floyd Mayweather, one of the best boxers to ever live, he's not an attacker; he's a counterpuncher. So I kind of let things come at you. I can't force. I don't want to force my fight or my mindset of what I want to happen in a particular situation. Step back, let things come to you, and do your counterpunching. Make your decisions from that. I would, from a managing standpoint as well, is I would do kind of that golden rule you learn in kindergarten. Do to others as you would want to be done to you. And I try to truly treat everyone with as much respect as I possibly can. Look at them as a person. No one's a number at all with that. Sometimes you get emotionally invested, which might not be the best thing if you're looking at something from a complete business lens. But that, for me, I'd rather look at somebody as an individual, understand who they are, what they need, what their goals in life are. And once you start connecting truly person to person, things start falling into place much more. So that, for me, it's truly connecting with each employee, each customer. And once you start doing that, you realize you're building relationships. You're not just providing a service. You're not just providing a job. We're people helping people. And I try to get down to the core of that as much as I possibly can. Sometimes you lose sight of that with things on the line, but that's pretty much my guiding light through managing people most of the time.
Yeah. And I mean, you hear that from business leaders as they look back, but I think that that's been something, at least for me personally, and I tell my wife to hold me accountable. Don't ever let me lose the essence of who I've been getting into this as the stakes get raised, as the influence gets greater. That, some of the things early on that I think really helped me get ahead or open doors was just being able to see each person as their own person and treating them individually and really trying to love them where they're at and, be present with them in that moment. Yeah. And, when you only have so few people in your circle that work for you, it's easy to be very intentional with every person. And obviously, as you grow, whether it's in business or you do something like this with your podcast, I try to, for people that reach out to me and let me know how much the show means to them, take the time to really write back to them a personalized message, and acknowledge I know what it's like to reach out to people that have influenced me and never hear back from them. They never respond. But even within just my day-to-day life, and this isn't even within just working with my employees, but just in general, I've mentioned this a couple of times in my show, but a quote that really changed maybe how I was thinking about things was, how you do anything is how you do everything. And whether it's, my employees, whether it's my wife, whether it's people at an event that I meet, not having like different capacities for how we deal with people with these different scenarios in life, but just like you said, doing unto others what you would want to be done to yourself, no matter where you are. What I've realized in my career and in my life is it's many times the unexpected introductions, the unexpected appointments with people that when you treat them well has been where some of my greatest open doors have come from, not knowing that was going to be the case, but especially whether it's now seeking out these podcast guests or what I do as a business with my business partners. When you treat people with honesty, with goodness, you love them where they're at, regardless of how they look at the world or what they're going through, which again has never been easier in 2023 to write people off that don't see the world that you do or don't agree with what you have. We see that every night on the news and in social media, but to really just love somebody where they're at. I can't tell you how many times somebody has turned around and, asked me something about the business or introduced me to somebody else because of that. And that wasn't my mindset going into it. It was just trying to love people where they're at. And so I think for you, that's such a great thing as somebody who's got a lot on their plate as it is now, to recognize these simple truths, which is, again, too, we never know. And you've touched on this, so I want to share it too. we never know what somebody's going through. I think a lot of times, maybe our frustrations in dealing with other human beings is you walk in excited for the day and you see a colleague, you see somebody, you say hello in a positive attitude, and maybe they don't necessarily greet you the same way or they give you some attitude. It's very easy to begin to create judgments against that person or wonder what's wrong with them, but you don't know what happened to them on the way into work. You don't know what's going on in their personal life that may have nothing to do with you. You are just getting the exterior, what's happened to them, and that's what they're putting forth. And so I think learning to separate yourself from it, one of the things that has totally helped me is just this thing I say to myself all the time, good, bad, or indifferent. It's not about me. When something happens to me that I don't necessarily agree with, or like I didn't see coming, the way somebody didn't, greet me the way I wanted to, I just remind myself internally, I don't say it out loud, I'm not a weirdo, but I try to say to myself, it's not about me. And for me in that moment, you're not always going to have time to go into a prayer closet or go meditate in the back room. But sometimes you need to develop these very real in the moment things that you can do in your mind when somebody's talking to you and a conversation is getting away from you to ground yourself. And if just saying in your mind, it's not about me, helps bring you back, like, man, reshift where this conversation's going. Those have been the little things that have helped me. So I appreciate you sharing what you did along those lines.
Yeah, and that very approach too has been a huge one in parenting. You could be, slept 3 hours over the past 2 nights, and then they're up crying or upset, and then if you can take that moment to realize that and just truly realize how blessed and lucky you are to be in that moment, to be holding a healthy child, it totally helps me totally stay centered from that and be in that moment. It's not about me. It's not about me at all. I 100% agree. Yeah, good point.
Well, and the reality is, though, we're human beings, so we got to have grace for ourselves. You can say that when you're not, it's early in the morning or it's a beautiful day out and you're not up at 2 a.m. to remind yourself that you're blessed to be a parent with a healthy child. But when it's 2 a.m. and you're dead tired and you wake up, you might miss it in that moment. I think the big thing is not to stay there. And even if you go back to bed and you missed it in that moment, getting up the next day and saying, you know what, I blew it. It's time to have a fresh start, and not beating yourself up, because that's what we can do too. We all want to be positive in the moment, but we miss it. I know we always like to pivot towards the end of these episodes with our start, stop, and continue, which we can work our way into. But anything, kind of from today that we've touched on that you'd love to get into before we do that, or we can jump right into it?
No, I think we can jump right into it.
Well, if you're new to the One Big Thing, something that my wife and I thought would be super fun as a way to kind of bring it home, right? When you call a show the One Big Thing, what we're realizing is it's not typically one big thing that people experience, but a series of life lessons that they can bring to you from super practical insights. Well, a great way to bring that home is to have every guest share something that they want to start doing, something that they want to stop doing, and something that they want to continue doing. And this is a part of the show that when people reach out to me, they tell me has really reshaped, personalizing it for their life. So Spencer, I want to turn it over to you. What's something you want to start, stop, and continue doing?
Sure. So I really want to start another business that I've planning to start this coming 2024. It's kind of got there's got some legs to it right now. We're starting to put some of it in action. I'm not really ready to totally release what it is, and maybe I can come back in 2024 to kind of announce what it's going to be ultimately. But that's my number one start right now. This is something I'm much more passionate about. Something that, because the businesses that I do now, I certainly have interest in them, but this new business is like who I am to my core, and ultimately what I want to do for my career when I see myself being 70 years old. I could see myself doing this forever. So that's my start. That's I'm starting it already, but I'm really planning to, sink my teeth in it in the next month or two. Stop is putting my phone away. I want to stop having my phone with me all the time. I don't want to stop putting my phone away. I want to stop using my phone. I want to put that, when I come home from work and business hours are over, that needs to go on the charger and be put on a countertop and not be looked at for hours. It's so easy to stay glued to your phone, whether it's social media, whether it's just texting friends and family, and being kept in the loop of different things going on, checking emails to see what's happening at 7 at night. I don't need to do that. that's my number one stop. Is I want to be as present as I can when I'm with my family and friends. I'm actually planning on getting like a flip phone or something like that. So it's kind of my emergency phone that I have that after hours. I put my main work phone on the charger, have my flip phone that I give that number to 10 of the people that are the closest to me that need to have that number so they can contact me if they need me. But ultimately, I'm trying to really stop that screen time that I've been getting. Continue is the meditating. I want to continue meditating. I absolutely do it at least once a day. I'll specifically wake up early for it, even if I didn't get much sleep the night before. I was doing it twice before, but being a parent changes some of the schedule a little bit. But if I can continue to try to find some time during the day, even to take 5 minutes to try to center yourself, that would be that's my number one continue right now, and to continue to go deeper in it, because it's a crazy deep world in the meditation universe. So I want to continue to keep pushing the limit in that, and really intertwine that in every fiber of what I have going on in my world.
So those are awesome. And that's what I love about Start, Stop, Continue, is just how different and applicable they are for each person. And I know we're all guilty. Personal antidote, my wife and I, and again, I don't mind mentioning her because she was actually a guest on the show. There's been many a nights where we've both laid in bed and been on our iPhones, and we both look up at some point and be like, we got to get off our phones. And 10 minutes later, we're still watching Instagram Reels or shopping on Amazon. And it's a very real challenge in a digital age to separate yourself from this little handheld device that connects you to the world. So I do love that you're aware, which is step one, that maybe you're on the phone too much, but stepping away from it really is a hard thing, especially when you're running a business. And I know you mentioned getting a flip phone. I mean, I don't know if you're going full NV2 from where we were 15 years ago with the little keyboard. Well, a little life hack, if you guys don't know this, if you do have an iPhone, you can set up your do not disturbs at nighttime. And what that allows you to do is you can actually set up key contacts. So it's basically the same idea of what you just said without having to get a flip phone. So if there are certain people, your wife, business partner, that those are the only people you want to be able to basically get through that do not disturb contact, you can set the time and the hours from 7 p.m. till 7 a.m. Do not disturb me whatsoever with Twitter updates, Facebook updates, text from anybody. But if for some reason these many people, however you want to list, call me or email me, I need that to be able to come through. So that's just something I learned with iPhone, because that was, a real challenge for me, which is like, how do I get away from the phone when I feel like it can be easy to feel like everybody, when they reach out to you, needs you and wants to get back to you. And I'm such a people person that I feel almost responsible to get back to people when they reach out to me and you text me at night, even if I'm with my wife and I hear from Spencer Smith, hey man, how are you? I feel obligated, not in a mean or malicious way, but because I love you as a person, to be like, hey Spencer, so great to hear from you. Meanwhile, my wife's staring at me like, hey babe, I thought we talked about not being on our phone at night. So I love those ideas. I love that you are aware of that. And I think, my hope is that with having you on the show, there's a lot that we've definitely covered. As I said, in the show notes, we'll have some of your contact information about some of the businesses you have in case anybody would like to get in touch with you, some of your social media handles. But Spencer, I just want to thank you not only as a dear friend, but definitely as a guest on my show. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for being honest. Thanks for being transparent.
For having me.
And this was a great conversation. So as always, thanks for stopping by the One Big Thing. And we hope that this conversation helps you move the ball forward together.